Zenu. Good morning. Forgive my public display of a horrible habit. This is going to be about the illusory truth effect. It's a continuation from Kyva Go. Her comment on my cyberpsych video. Moving right along, he, I don't know if it's a she or a he, but I know whoever Kyva Go is pretty familiar with psychology. So whoever you are, Kyva Go, wherever you come from, doing these videos has helped, because well, some of the stuff I am studying already, there are things in here that are a bit deeper than a 101 type class. So I think this would be in the correct order, so you won't have to reorder. Kyva Go actually went and reordered the wiki links to match the order of my videos, which is really awesome. Appreciate that. Didn't have to do that, but it is going to make it easier for people to follow along. So this is going to be the illusory truth effect. And it's very, very interesting. I think this is the topic that everyone can grasp fully and see it in their everyday life occurring around them, digitally and in person, people on Facebook and whatnot. It's called the illusory truth effect. And what it states is that, this is also referred to as the truth effect. What it states is that the repetition of an item. People are blowing me up. Go away right now. Okay. The repetition of a statement, whether it's true or false, tends to be interpreted as truth with the amount of repetitions, the exposure to the repetitions of the item, saying whatever. In the wiki article, it talks about Cato, Roman. Is it Roman? Greek. Let's see here. I'm not going to read the whole article because she linked it, but let's see, yeah. Roman statesman Cato ended all of his speeches saying, "Destroy Carthage." And other people who've used that effect, the truth effect, would be Ronald Reagan, Marcus Antonius in Shakespeare's play Julius Caesar. I don't know what the line would be. Don't think I ever watched that play. There's some other studies that are pretty relevant and important, because the initial study proved that people will believe things if repeated, whether they're false or true. Later, they did some further. Some people did some further testing because they believed that the truth effect only happened where individuals were highly uncertain about a given statement. In other words, if you weren't sure about something, you just take it for truth if someone said it, and if multiple people said it, especially. The more times the the truth is said or reinforced, the more you will believe it. But it turns out that the illusory truth effect, it works the same way with truth as it does with false news. So later that was challenged by Lisa Fazio, Nadia Brazier, Keith Payne, Elizabeth Marsh, and they published something in the Journal of Experimental Psychology, and the study suggested that the truth effect can have an impact on the participants who actually knew the correct answer to begin with, but were swayed to believe otherwise through repetition. So you might know something to be true. Sky is blue, grass is green, but the repetition of a falsehood, for example, when participants on multiple occasions, the statement, "Sorry" is the name of the short plaid skirt worn by Scots. Some of them were likely to come to believe that it was true, even though the same people were able to correctly answer the question, what is the name of a short pleated skirt worn by Scots? Which we all know is a kilt. But after replacing the results in another experiment, Fazio and her team attributed this curious phenomenon to processing fluency, which is a term that describes the facility with which people comprehend statements. Repetition, explained the researcher, makes statements easier to process, more fluent relative to new statements, leading people to the sometimes false conclusion that they are more truthful. And so, I mean, okay, processing fluency. There's a baseline here, and I think the baseline is the truth effect. You know, the more you expose, and exposure, you know, the more you expose someone to a falsehood, and the more it's reinforced, the easier it is to believe, whether you know it to be true or not. Whether you know it to be true or not. The same applies in Scientology. You may not believe in the whole track. You may not believe that we live lifetime after lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, dying and being born and dying and going somewhere, being lost, being caught in a theta trap, get caught in a theta trap, and then somehow or another end up in a body again, because there's Martians or aliens or, you know, aliens far off a billion years away that don't want us in their space because we're too powerful and we're too evil, so they send us back to Earth through these theta traps. You may not believe that, or you may not know. You may know that ain't true. But even still, with the illusory truth effect, you may come to believe it. The effect works because people assess truth. Because when people assess truth, they rely on whether the information agrees with their understanding or whether it feels familiar. So the more you're studying Scientology, and the more it's familiar, it's just familiarity, and if it agrees with the understanding, and I would imagine that applies to the group as well. So if the group think is, you know, theta versus in theta, then that is more real. The idea that there's theta traps is more real than, you know, you die in your worm food. Yeah, so the condition is logical as people compare new information with what they already know to be true and consider the credibility of both sources. And considering the credibility of both sources would probably include, over time, with exposure to a group like Scientology, belief. So, Kind of lost my train of thought there. I'm sorry. And I may be going a little fast. The initial study was done in 1977 at Villanova and Temple University, and they were asked to rate a series of trivia statements, true or false. So, really, it's the tendency to believe information to be correct after repeated exposures. There are a lot of things that you're repeatedly exposed to, that one could be repeatedly exposed to. And the different divisions in the church will be exposed to different references, different policies, different executive orders, as LRH meticulously put these programs together. And I guess the reason I still have my hard sell pack, I gave my dictionary and my ethics book to someone who was interested in reading a little bit about Scientology, because she already knew how horrible it was, and she was interested in the ethics, the ethics beliefs. And I don't have a reason to really want them back. I don't think I ever need to do an ethics condition again, or look up any mumbo jumbo from the tech dictionary. I could be wrong. Maybe I will need to do that, but everything's online, so I don't think I will. But I have my hard sell pack in that. For most of the posts that I held, it was every reference that I needed was in there, especially like for the training that I was wanting to do. It was a lot of the references that that corresponded to the data series training and the ESTO training, which Chris Shelton did the entire data series. He's one of the only people I know in the church that, whether I know them personally or not, that completed the data series. And the data series is designed to his channel is called Critical Thinker at Large, and that's what the data series is designed to do. Now, I never even saw the data series. I'm sure it's a series of policy letters and stuff, but that's what it claims to do, is to be able to help you make sense of things, if that makes any sense. But if you watch some of his first videos on how he's explaining Scientology, how he used Scientology to break down Scientology, I would say that it had a moderate level of effectiveness. But I wouldn't attribute it all to the data series. I wouldn't attribute it to the data series, probably not even half. I've never seen the data series, so I can't discredit it entirely. So there is a possibility that there is an attributable amount of his ability to dissect and show the aspects of Scientology the way that he did in his early videos, and the way that he still continues to do from the data series. But I've never really seen the content of the data series. The content of the ESTO series, some of it I have seen, and some of it is in the hard sell pack. So that's why I had the hard sell pack. And the reason I wanted to be an Esto was because of the references is what I was always trying to get the staff to recognize. They would do their own thing, and they would follow some of the references, you know. But there's so many that you can, you know, you can really argue for days about who's more in ethics, you know, who's more ethical by what tech they are applying. Some people on staff find a couple of references and apply those to their daily life in sales and in auditing or whatever. But there's different sets of references for different posts. So with the gross income, the GI of the Melrose mission being a number one priority for the first several years of it opening, from my perspective, the Esto position was a crucial position for the Melrose mission to have. And so I volunteered for Esto training, but I never could get out of ethics. And Esto training is like a real honor. That, you know, it's a privilege. You know, it's not. It would be the same thing as asking for auditing, really, because you supposedly get so much out of it. But I figured that since it would be a mutually beneficial thing, because there's a reference that LRH speaks about Estos, and says that they are absolutely crucial to a new mission or to an org. You must have an Esto to enforce policy, because people will go off policy. And there's another reference there he talks about off policy. And then there's a main reference called KSW, which is keeping Scientology working, which is making sure the technology is correct, making sure the technology is correctly applied, and that's the job of the Esto, is to make sure KSW is applied. So one of the things that really comes to mind with regard to the truth effect, or the illusory truth effect, is the Code of a Scientologist. And one of the very first things that I learned in Scientology let me look it up real quick. Personal integrity. So, the personal integrity is the first reference that I read that was pretty convincing that there was some truth in Scientology. And if one thing can be true, then other things can be true. This is the Scientology website. I gotta mute it. What is true for you is what you have observed for yourself, and when you lose that, you've lost everything. Right there is the, like, blaringly in your face. If you're gonna believe something in the church, you're gonna believe other things, it seems. And the way that this is worded is just so odd. It's playing on words, playing with people's heads. You know, it's trying to be philosophical. It's but it's more of a trap. You know, it's not philosophical. What is true for you is what you've observed for yourself, and when you lose that, you've lost everything. You're damn straight. That is true. When you lose sight of what you are, and you don't know what you believe, and you don't know who you are, then you lost everything. In my opinion, that's true. What is personal integrity? Personal integrity is knowing what you know. And here's where it's like, huh? Knowing what you know. What you know is what you know, and to have the courage to have the courage to know and say what you have observed. And that is integrity, and there is no other integrity. I'm sorry. That didn't make any fucking sense. But the first thing did. Of course, we can talk about honor, truth, nobility, all those esoteric terms. To me, they're not that esoteric. They're pretty concrete and real. You know, honesty is a pretty real thing to me. But I think they would all be very well covered if we observed what we observed, took care to observe what we were observing, and always observe to observe, and not necessarily maintaining a skeptical attitude, a critical attitude, or an open mind. Don't be open-minded. Don't be critical. Don't be skeptical. You see how it's slipping in these. You got a truth up here. And then, you know, it's like a freeing thing. And then with the rest, tie you up with belief. So anyways, not necessarily maintaining these things at all, but certainly maintaining a sufficient personal integrity and sufficient personal belief and confidence in self and courage that we can observe what we observe and say what we have observed. Great, because that's what I'm doing. You know, when I did my doubt condition on whether or not I should remain a Scientologist, personal integrity was in that formula, because having the truth to say what you've seen, or having the courage to say what you've seen, to what you've observed, and having the courage to say what you've observed. That's personal integrity. Okay, I can go with that. But I'm not skeptical that the church is. I'm not skeptical anymore that the church is a destructive force. I am highly critical of it. And those things don't fall in line with his version of personal integrity. Because his version of personal integrity is not the truth. But he uses the truth effect. I also didn't go over the code of Scientologists. Let's see if we got that. Because that came in my mind here. Go to Scientologist. Oh, don't start with me, computer. You just connected. Come on. Saying there's no internet connection. I saw that someone had commented about the 706 area code from a previous video. Someone had called my brother, some guy named Jerry, who was an INT terminal, and well, he called for, I can't remember if he called my phone or if he called Travis's phone. Or maybe he called Travis's phone, and then I got the number from Travis, tried calling it back, never got an answer. Yeah, this thing is not wanting to cooperate. Maybe we can go over the code of a Scientologist another time. This is getting to be almost 25 minutes long. Truth effect. Repeated exposure to false and truth. And you can manipulate it either way. If you want someone to believe more false, then you just put some false in there and repeat it, exposure. Kind of goes along with conditioning, you know, operant and classical conditioning, changing factors in the environment and changing stimuluses and responses, and pairing unconditioned stimuluses and unconditioned responses to get a conditioned response with a conditioned stimulus. There we go, now I'm connected. Good. So refresh. Code of a Scientologist. Might as well, huh? Okay. This is this is from the Scientology website. Code of a Scientologist was first issued in 1954. In this code, L. Ron Hubbard provides the Scientologist with guidelines for fighting for human rights and justice through social reform. It is a vital code for any Scientologist active in the community. The code was revised in 1969 and again in 1973 and is given here in the final version. As a Scientologist, I pledge myself to the Code of Scientology for the good for all. Number 1, to keep Scientologists, the public, and press accurately informed concerning Scientology, the world of mental health and society. That seems to have changed since I was, I think there might be another revision somewhere that I wasn't aware of, because I don't remember that being the first one. I think they might change it. To use the best I know of Scientology to the best of my ability to help my friends, families, groups, and others around the world. To refuse to accept for processing and to refuse to accept money from any freak, clear, or group that I feel I cannot honestly help. Cognitive dissonance, okay? This is why this came up, because the truth effect, if you believe that, if you believe that you should refuse to accept help or to accept for processing people you cannot help, you are breaking the code of a Scientologist. And that's one of the things there, like that's something that seems ethical and moral. You know, don't offer someone help that you cannot honestly help, yet you do it all the time on staff. And so there is a point where you will have some cognitive dissonance if you believe that. And you can bring out the Code of a Scientologist in front of an executive, and they will plop out a technical issue and another issue and another issue and say, here, go read these in the course room and clear all your words, and then come back and tell me what a Code of Scientologist is. Because there's always something that you don't understand, and something else that they want you to believe. To decry and to do all I can to abolish any and all abuses against life and mankind. Well, what is it that we're all trying to do here? The people who are talking about their experiences in Scientology, we're following some of the code of a Scientologist. Crazy. Paradoxical. To expose and abolish any and all physical damaging practices in the field of mental health. Well, Scientology is a field of belief. But all of its methods are stolen from the mental health field. So to me, this is like a rogue mental health agency that is brainwashing people and using mental health processes harmfully. So this is a damaging practice. So that's how I would rationalize that. To help clean up and clean the field of mental health. To bring out an atmosphere of safety and security in the field of mental health by eradicating its abuses and brutality. To support a true humanitarian endeavors in the field of human rights. To embrace the policy of equal justice for all. To work for freedom of speech in the world. To actively decry the suppression of knowledge, wisdom, and philosophy or data which would help mankind. To support the freedom of religion. To help Scientology orgs and groups ally themselves with public groups. To teach Scientology at a level that can be understood and used by the recipients. To stress the freedom to use Scientology as a philosophy in all its applications and variations in the humanities. To insist upon standard and unvaried Scientology as the applied activity in ethics, processing, and administration in Scientology organizations. To take my share of responsibility for the impact of Scientology upon the world. To increase the numbers and strength of Scientology over the world. To set an example of the effectiveness and wisdom of Scientology. To make this world a saner, better place. Honestly, I think they changed it since I was there, because we had a plaque of the Code of the Scientologist, and it didn't say anything like that. It was much simpler. It had nothing to do with, this has a lot to do with like Div 2 stuff, like dissemination. And there wasn't like, I mean, the Code of the Scientologist wasn't, it was more first dynamic oriented, so they've changed it. I can't prove that. I'd have to have the plaque that was hanging in the ED's office, but or in there was several plaques I saw. It was, you know, they were maybe that was one of the earlier versions. Maybe that was one of the 1973 version or the 69 version. Not sure, but it seems that they've changed their focus and shifted their focus to more public relations oriented Code of a Scientologist. And that's all. That's it. I got pieces. I got places to do and people to go. Have a nice day.